Yeah. Anyway, T minus 60 seconds.
Marissa, do you have to hit a big red button in order to make it go live, or?
I just need to make it public. It is live, but it's not public yet.
Okay.
We'll do this.
Okay. You got less than 60 seconds, so whenever you're ready.
I'm good to go when you guys are.
Go.
Oh, me too. Yeah. How long is this going for?
However long it takes.
Yeah.
We'll keep it like it has to be uploadable, so we'll be reasonable.
Yeah.
Plus,
I'll let you guys take off though, yeah, and then I'll kind of say hello as well.
Sure.
Oh, good. That was the countdown.
Yeah.
Well, we're live.
Hello.
Hello.
I guess I'll intro us. So, hello to all. We're live on Facebook and YouTube, I think. So, from our end, the Wolff College of Coffee and Wolff Coffee Roasters with Peter Wolff. And then way down in Melbourne, though he doesn't look like he's in Melbourne, he looks like he's on a paradise beach somewhere. We're working on our own background. We wanted sharks going in ours, but we couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Callum and the guys at Colab. So
Howdy ho team. COVID has definitely put me to this where now I'm pretending I'm back in Queensland wearing a Hawaiian shirt with this background here.
Well, I think a lot of Victorians will want to be up in Queensland. I think is more, at least you're preparing yourself emotionally for the transition.
and Corona the brand now from where you'd rather be. It's even more ironically perfect.
Yeah, it's a little too accurate right now.
So I guess from an introductory standpoint, what we'd like to say is the reason why we're here and the reason why we're all together is that you guys down in Melbourne are in the midst of and about to enter into your final week of using our coffee, which we're very appreciative of and hope you have absolutely enjoyed what you've done so far. You've been featuring things like our three major house blends from Big Dog, Little Red and Edelweiss, and you're about to head on to our seasonal, which is Oktoberfest. A whole bunch of our farmers and some of our most prized producers around the world, between Aida and the natural coffee we sent from El Salvador through to Guatemala, Fiesta Vinca Hermosa. And we put a Mexican coffee in there as well, so it was
just
quite
using that
a
at the
range.
moment, it's stunning.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess we're here today to kind of talk about why we worked together, who we are, what we did, and how it all went. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess from your viewership end, we kind of wanted to open up with who Wolff is and who this guy is, and give him an introduction to kind of why we do what we do. So
Yeah.
Pete, who are you?
Well, I think I suppose. Who am I? Yeah, that's a good question. I ask myself that some days as well. But yeah, look, I think for us, have been in the coffee and tea business for this is now my 36th year. So originally started up here in Brisbane in 1984, sort of a little fresh young man straight out of high school, and kind of stumbled into the tea and coffee world as my university job whilst I was kind of going to launch into my legal career. And this was all around the time of Gordon Gekko and that sort of 1980 power suit and padded shoulders, and so that was the trajectory for me. I think that was the plan, but coffee sort of got in the way, and I'm so glad that it did, because it sort of sent me on a journey that I've made a life out of, and have had the opportunity to sort of travel the world. And meet amazing people connected within the whole coffee chain globally, and then have had the fortune of not only that, but opening some really world-class businesses here, and being involved in aromas, and then co-founding Veneziano Coffee, and then obviously coming back up here to Brisbane in 2008, and Penny, my wife, and I decided to get stuck into doing something a little bit different with Wolff, and sort of really taking a different sort of heart and headspace. And so I guess, we wanted different things from Wolff than we did from our previous businesses, because that's our journey, I suppose, and so doing things a little bit differently was kind of one of our sort of mantras. So yeah, so we're based up here back home back in good old Brisbane, and continuing to really wanting to sort of extend our customers' kind of palate experience. It's sort of one of our kind of key tenets, and just getting back to working with some really amazing producers, and taking their sort of work and trying to showcase that and represent it in the best way that we can, and put it into hands of people like yourself, Cal, and your team to be able to then allow the customer sort of that sort of experience and that sort of connection as well.
Absolutely, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to do that. The feedback is just always tremendous, and it's really exciting hearing people react to it. It's from Brisbane, and thoroughly enjoying it. It's great.
Well, it is one of those. It is kind of, I suppose, it's one of those interesting things because. When I moved from Brisbane to Melbourne, so I left here in 1995 and moved to Melbourne. And, at that particular stage, there was only 3 people still roasting coffee in Brisbane. There were 3 coffee roasters, yeah. And so not long after, some other names sort of started. And so I went to Melbourne, and to me it was a community. It was sort of maybe 50 roasters, and I was, for me that was like, wow, that's incredible. You know what I mean? Wow, good. But I think that was kind of like, you're from where? And then I sort of said, Aromas on Hastings Street Nursery. And of course, every Melbourneian was like, oh yeah, I know that. Well, and I knew I was on a good thing because I kind of figured that if Brisbane coffee couldn't have been that bad in terms from a Melbourneian perspective, because you basically packed out Noosa freaking day and night, and so you were liking the coffee. So I kind of knew our roasting style and my roasting style was going to be sort of well received. So when I moved back, funnily enough, in 2008, I came back up, and I was from Melbourne then all of a sudden. And, he's a Melbourne, this guy's from Melbourne. I'm like, well, I was really from Brisbane, but, I just sort of spent a fair chunk of time sort of in Melbourne. But I think Melbourne still sort of, at the moment, holds that sort of real kind of historical kind of cornerstone as being, the knowledge of coffee, or the cornerstone of coffee. Because of some of the discussions that we have with people up here, it's like, I only want to deal with a local roaster. And that's an interesting sort of discussion, because these are people that are even up at the Sunshine Coast. And they would think, we're not even local enough. But yet they're happy to stock coffee from a Melbourne roaster. And I'm like, but how's that? Oh, but they're from Melbourne, so it's different, So, yeah, it's an interesting part of that sort of coffee psychology, I think, yeah.
But between yourself, Cal, being a former Queenslander, and then...
very proudly too.
And then you being a Queenslander to Melbourne and back to Queensland, would you say that a lot of Melbourne's coffee and culture and everything being forefront or leading is as a result of just abundance, or is it that there are enough niches that it's gotten better because of it?
I think,
like, if you go from here with 2 or 3 down to 50, is it just because they had 50 that there was that domino effect that it got bigger and bigger and bigger very quickly?
Well, I think it's about contextual congruity. I think it's sort of at that moment in time. And so when I sort of arrived into Melbourne, I sort of came with, I suppose, not a lot of baggage. Like, I didn't come with I'm Italian or I'm Greek, and my mum and dad came over here on a boat, and here we are. And we didn't come with that. And so we just sort of came down rocking our kind of coffee, and we developed what we did because that's what people liked. And so I suppose from that very early, from the mid 80s onwards, the coffee scene up here was non-existent pretty much, and then the cafe thing sort of happened. We grew with that, and so I think for us, or for myself, a lot of it was also just bloody good timing. I think people were sort of ready to make the next kind of step in that sort of evolution of coffee. And it was hard. I'm not going to say getting settled into Melbourne and trying to establish a business when you're going up big multinationals, and they were everywhere, with big budgets and massive sort of checkbook incentives to sort of basically sign on, and we're kind of bootstrapping our way into it as hard as we could, but we really kind of just rested on our laurels of doing really good flavoured coffee, great flavour and sort of integrity. And that was really what shined through, was the quality of what was in the cup. And then we were transparent, and we were telling people what was in our blend and when it was roasted. yes, you can touch the grinder and we'll show you how to get the best out of it. And so that was kind of a little bit different, I suppose, back in sort of the mid-90s in Melbourne, yeah. So, and a lot sort of changed, and that, I think, started to get the momentum going. And then as that momentum builds, then, other pathways and opportunities or laneways start opening up, and that's where you start seeing where other roasters and other companies were starting to explore these other laneways. And then all of a sudden I thought, we now have a wider kind of profile that, coffee can be sort of showcased around on.
That's fantastic, because as a Brisbane local, going down Line Driftwood, that was definitely one of the pinnacles of the specialty coffee scene in Brisbane. Is you have to go there and speak of the different laneways and avenues, the amount of equipment and coffee that was present there. Like for me, that was I remember my first time there with James, and James Shire showed me around Veneziano Roaster, and he's like, "Look, this is the OGs. This is where it happened." And he was mentioning, they came down from Melbourne up here to kind of be like, "Let's do our thing here," and it was definitely mind blowing first time we went, just to see the diversity of the product on offer as well. It's definitely taken the next step.
Yeah, it was an interesting one, because I think at the time too, it was also, again, very fortunate that it was a really great timing thing that we, came back up from Melbourne, and Brisbane was kind of just starting to start thinking about the specialty thing. But also when we thought about sort of Melbourne, when we looked at it, and my wife Penny sort of started considering sort of the concept behind sort of Dandelion and Driftwood, we, everything was kind of, we felt, had that, we've gone for that really minimalist industrial sort of feel, and they all had sort of names like Grind or Tamp or, and so we kind of wanted to really create a space where people, young, old, could come and enjoy tea, and we were doing some really high quality single estate teas as well, but also coffees, and we had a brew bar as well. And a lot of people may remember we flew a couple of American guys across to help us sort of get the brew bar going, and got all of that recipes going. So we had these two sort of real edgy sort of dudes from America that came over and helped us kind of really get our brewing style sort of down pat. We were doing Chemex, Siphon, Trifecta Brewer, Cold Drip.
You brought Americans into Australia to talk about coffee.
It
just seems sacrilege at the core of it, doesn't it?
To do filter coffee, and I think it really
that's what they know.
It really added this credibility.
Yeah.
But the irony was that when I first started roasting coffee back in 1984, what I was predominantly roasting was for filter coffee anyway, because espresso really hadn't been a thing, so it was all French press, mocha pot or cafetiera, and so Melita, the old school Melitas and all that sort of stuff, and there wasn't really a lot of espresso coffee that we were roasting. And we were roasting some dark coffee too, don't get me wrong. I mean, it was we were doing a lot of darkly roasted coffee, but that's what the market was asking for, and that was where the knowledge was in the market at that point in history. And so, that's one of the things that's important, is about producing a product that people want to buy, that, keeps you in business, So I think, that makes it, and that makes, sort of that, the Dandelion and Driftwood experience so special. And it was something very, very unique for people. And we also, took into that the concept of exploring the two blends, being the Dandelion and Driftwood, being that one sort of really catered towards a feminine palate and one catered towards a masculine palate. And so we really, Penny did a lot of, sort of being an ex-academic, she did a lot of, got in a lot of that sort of research, and we sort of distilled down sort of what are the key flavour drivers that both men and women were looking for. And then we kind of took those, and then we designed those into our flavour profiles. And so we had, the feminine blend and the masculine blend. And it was just something really unique to start exploring for coffee. And that sort of really kind of was that sort of next level engagement piece. But then also having, the two single origins available for people as well. And then having a really highly trained team that, and you've been there, Cal, it was You know, it was bow tie. You know,
Oh yeah, I loved
was,
it. I mean, it just stood apart from that industrial element that you're talking about. Yeah.
And you would sit down and, you know, we would talk you through the coffees. This is what we have today. This is what, you know, we talk through the farmers, the process, the flavors. What would you like? And it was incredible. It was an incredible journey. Yeah, it was an amazing business. Mm.
So I guess to the point of where we are now and what we've just had with you guys and what we're continuing to have with you guys for the rest of this, I guess when we move towards what we as Wolff Coffee Roasters now supply and what we have supplied you, part of the conversation then becomes that it's not about us. And I guess what I want to know is, as a reflective, having now done this a few times yourself, one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on is that any one of our staff members can go like this and say, you know, Aida Bathier, Boyce Harris, Edward Martinez, and just start naming off the 6 or 7 featured producers that we consistently work with every year. Cal, I mean, I guess you can tell us from a Melbourne perspective, is that something that a lot of people are doing now? I mean, we've all now gotten to a point of meet the farmer, but is it consistent that everyone seems to be now really
I think it's definitely navigating that way. With previous roasters that we had, Market Lane, they were so big as well with you guys, with the farmer. It's about the connection. It's about who's making the coffee. It's about what they've been through and how it got to the stage that there is. I think that there are definitely a portion of I guess future-looking roasters down here that are definitely taking that into consideration. I think that's definitely the way the shift is going. I dare say we're going to find people at that more pioneer leadership stage going to be doing that on a more of a globalized scale nowadays, just because of the interconnectivity with Instagram and other social media.
But I guess then the question's for you, Pete, which is that you know, we do it because we want to, but I mean, any business, any roasting business, you could not, but why do you want to be voicing who our farmers are, who our producers are, why it matters as much as it does to us?
Well, I think for me, you know, I always sort of say to people, look, you know, this Wolff Coffee Roasters, you know, we really want our journey is very different. We want something different out of it. We're not a brand or a business that's trying to make a name for itself or start. You know, we're not trying to break into the market, and you know, I suppose we're fortunate because we have history within the industry, and that's been a really good leveraging point for us. And so I think through my coffee journey, that when I first originally started travelling to Origin, you were very heavily mentored by the exporter or whoever was hosting you, and it was kind of definitely let's go and have a look at the farms, you know, and all that, but don't talk to the farmer about price, you know, and all this sort of stuff, you know. And you were it was just kind of this weird sort of censorship almost, like you were so controlled of where you went. And so at some point, you know, you start asking the question like, well, what are you what are you actually getting paid for your coffee? And then, you know, that gap became realised to me. But then also you understand sort of, you know, the deliberate and conscious layers that are created and legislative layers that are created within coffee purchasing, that in some instances and in some countries it's never truly a direct trade relationship because I can't buy directly from the producer because I'm legally not allowed to, but you know, the producer may have to hand it off to a marketing agent, and then the marketing agents then got to represent the coffee and then either put it in and these are the challenges that you get. So for us, it's still continuing to work with that producer, and in that instance, to sort of ensure that, you know, what we agree on in terms of the price that's going to be paid for the coffee, that the marketing agent honours that, you know, but also then at this end of the supply line, the marketing agents, you know, we can start beating them around a little bit to try and get the margin a little bit better, you know, because really at the end of the day, they're just making money from passing a piece of paper from one hand to the next, you know, and you're like, wow, that's crazy, look at that, you know what I mean, like it's amazing. So I think the thing for us is that it was about sort of continuing to go back to work with the producers who are really like-minded and are wanting to push quality to the forefront. and they know or they realise that there's a shift in the market and people are seeking out greater sort of experiences of flavour. And so they're desperately trying to connect with people like myself and other like-minded roasters around the world, who in turn can represent them on a broader sort of scale. And so for us, what's really sort of important and what drives to kind of the heart of what we do outside of the quality and flavour is the philanthropic work that we do. And so not only do we provide our producers and work with our producers in terms of an adequate payment, more than adequate payment for their coffee. Next to that, we make a deliberate contribution based on the volume that we pay. So it might be it's maybe 25 US cents a pound or something like that, for example. And we will make that contribution to a local school community that supports or lives near our producer. Yeah. And so we want to work with those communities as well. And more importantly, because and part of that's because Penny, my wife, is an ex-teacher and she's an early childhood educator, so it's something that's really quite close to her heart, and it's one of her sort of key tenets. So she sort of drives this philanthropy work that we do. So not only do we support our producer in ensuring that their cost of living is met and exceeded, but also the communities that support that we also make a contribution beyond that. But we work through the producer to administer that. And so, we've got a number of great programs that we're working on around the world, which is fantastic. But then also locally within the own community, we make, the team here, we don't make the team, but we talk to the team about, well, what do we want to contribute in terms of the local community this year? Yeah. And so things like Penny going into Dancing CEOs and raising $53,000 for the Queensland Women's Legal Services, or, Lost Dogs Homes, and all these types of things that we do, local school charities, Oz Harvest, we work closely with the Oz Harvest guys. So there's a lot of things that we also do at a local level, which is also important to us as well. So one of the things I think is that people gain an understanding with us is that if, through every purchase that they make with us or through us, that purchase through us has a direct impact back through the supply chain into the communities, not only locally but internationally. And to be honest, it was a really nice recognition that this year we were acknowledged by the Queensland Community Foundation and won the Small to Medium Enterprise Philanthropist of the Year for Queensland.
Wow.
So yeah, thanks. So Penny could talk more around that, because that's sort of something that she works within that space a lot. It was quite to be honest, we were quite surprised because, there was energy companies at the final, and there's all these amazing, great businesses that are doing really amazing work in the various sort of areas that they've chosen to sort of to be active in. And so we just kind of rocked up thinking that we were making up the numbers, but there you go. But that's not really why we do that. I mean, it's a nice sort of acknowledgement, but it's something that we will continue to keep working on with our producers and their communities as much as we can. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tremendous, knowing that literally going down to your local cafe and buying a cup and knowing they stock Wolff coffee goes all the way back and affects every single level of community to that global scale. That's actually an incredible power to have.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It's a scary thought too. We're talking about the old ways of how it used to be. It sounds so much like you can take a tour of North Korea right now. They're like, yeah, come through, but no, don't look left. Do not look left. What's behind that curtain? Nothing.
What are they doing?
We'll take pause for a second. Just say there's a handful of people jumping in on the YouTube video, so thank you for joining us. We're here with Cal down in Colab in Melbourne, and Peter Wolff, and we're just talking about coffee and what we're doing and how we're sharing our coffee experiences. So anybody who's watching, feel free to leave comments. We'll take some Q&As at the end. But I guess in terms of the YouTube content, Cal, you were saying that you know us as well from the College of Coffee and where we are at the moment. I certainly know a big part of what I do around the roast house is teaching and education. You may know both of our faces from the College of Coffee YouTube video, and if you're not already subscribed. So I guess if we can touch just shortly on the college and I mean, as you were saying, a large part of Penny's background is teaching, but why, I guess, from not only your perspective, why education is so important, both in coffee, but then I guess, Cal, your end as well, that being given baristas who can work with you or for you, or you've seen that either lack the training or come into the space and go, oh, I've got Cert 3 in hospitality, and we all sit there going, that's nice, and it just doesn't actually have that follow through. So the vitality and how important having proper training and education is. Pete?
Absolutely.
Well, firstly, I just want to say a shout out to James, Xanthi, and Penny, who are have said something. So hello to you three out there. But yeah, gee whiz, education, knowledge sharing, gee whiz, this is going to be a big one. So I think, look, we've got to go back in time a little bit to about circa 2006, 2007. And I think, the phone was kind of starting to ring a little bit for me, and like, hey, Wolfie, can you teach me to roast coffee? And can I, I'll work for you for free. I'll name my unborn child after you. I need to know where to learn to roast coffee. And it was interesting because it was an observation that Penny made, and she said, dude, you've got the knowledge, and you need to, we need to put something together. You need to share this. You know what I mean? Like, you've got this sort of experience, and people are needing it. And so I think when one considered at the time, like, well, where did you go to learn to roast coffee? You know what I mean? Like. And so that's really was, I guess, the commencement of what was the Wolff College of Coffee. And so when we first launched our first roasting course, we weren't overly well prepared for it, I suppose, in some aspects. The curriculum was very good, and what we'd written was very good. We'd sold out our first course in 2 hours, and we'd overbooked it by 5 people because our booking systems were a little bit dodgy. But we were like, wow, that's really surprising. And then, we were pretty well much fully booked every 2 weeks for the next 5 years. And so we have had, people travel from all over the world to come and do their training with us. And I think we've estimated that our global alumni is nearly 15,000 people. And so through that process, we developed, obviously, and expanded our curriculum to be to be more than just coffee. And so we have this real kind of coffee pedagogy, I suppose. And we look at not only the barista sort of pathway, we have the roaster and sensory development sort of pathway. We also do a little bit more kind of, I suppose, in the business sort of the business space as well. But it kind of got us into sort of then thinking, well, what's kind of next? And so, then Penny sort of rocks along again and goes, hey, dude, I think we should start doing, vlogging or vlogging. What the vlogging and I didn't even know what she was talking about. She said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to create a YouTube channel, and every week we're going to get up and we're going to put some content up on the, and I thought, oh, I'm going, I don't have time for this. So seriously, what am I going to do this? Anyway, how blessed are we? And that's what I love about Penny, is that she sort of really has that sort of creative sort of vision. And she has a really unique ability to see beyond the horizon. And so begrudgingly, yes, I started off on this pathway with the Wolff College of Coffee on the YouTube channel. And now it's, and so for us, it was never really about, it's not about monetization or making money out of it. It was about about sharing our knowledge. Yes, Penny, you too. It's I suppose it's a real long tail sort of project if you think about it, and it builds trust. And so it's quite amazing that today, we have this sort of, and we see this now more so with what's happened with COVID and this real sort of move towards what we're doing now, this digital sort of space that, now more so than ever, that people go to our YouTube channel for for sort of advice or to refresh. And the content that we have on there is really quite amazing, and I think it's a really great sort of showcase to everyone that works within the Wolff team, and it gives them the ability to shine and share. And going onto Facebook and going onto the Probat owners group or something, and then some person's made a reference to sort of, oh, my roaster's broken, or it doesn't do this, and then someone's got a link to a YouTube video that I've made 3 years ago on how to fix something, and I look at that and I go, wow, that's exactly the reason why it's out there, is to help people, and to be of assistance. So I think being educated and having an education in whatever you pursue is very, very important, and to continue to grow and learn and to push yourself to be better than you are. And so I think, with coffee, the challenges that we find is that technology is making us improve things in small gains. I think, we've seen improvements in brewing equipment and roasting equipment, and we've seen some movements in the green coffee, not only through processing, but I mean the last biggest kind of push when we think about it was sort of obviously all the Gesha coffee. But now obviously with the Yemenia stuff, that really kind of, I think to me, seems to be going to be the next kind of push out as well. But that's also exciting for a whole different other reasons as far as I'm concerned. But I think, then it becomes about, well, how do we educate the consumer? And I think that's the education piece that's now the most important. And that's what, as we as coffee professionals, whether you're a barista, a roaster, delivery driver for whatever, it's about how are we going to educate or continue to keep, shining a light of quality to our consumers and making them understand why it's really important that, to be purchasing coffee, quality coffee, and supporting your local roasters who are really pushing it hard to sort of give back and do the right thing. And I think that's, these are the things that are important. But also at the same time, I think, having that sort of discussion, well, this is why you would pay more for it. And, I think that's important too, because people, we can't go, oh, that's your specialty coffee, so here it is, it's $8, well, because it's specialty coffee. Well, I think, that it requires a little bit more, kind of narrative to sit behind it to sort of actually justify the reason why we're paying $8. We're asking you to pay $8 for a cup of coffee.
I think a large part of the lack of knowledge, for lack of a better way of putting it, for the vast majority was that, 1994, a certain Golden Arches came out with their first cafes, and they were bringing out these cups, and other mainstream venues are still doing it. That says 100% Arabica on the side of the cup. Yeah. And no one's saying to your average Joe what that is. They don't understand it to be a branch or a type of coffee, but otherwise that's what it is. So they're continuing to assume that means 100% good, or there's some kind of connotation to quality. But it doesn't necessarily mean. We certainly got that when, it was around 2009, 2010 that we had all these people coming in going, oh, is your coffee 100% Arabica? And all the cafes that I was working in. And we're like,
I don't remember that.
No. And there was this general understanding that there's Arabica and Robusta, and that's all that everyone knew. And we're up to 124 varieties at last check. And no one's talking about, your standard consumer's not talking about the rest of them. I'd be interested to find out of those 15,000 people, how many of them have sons or daughters about age 12 that are named Peter. Just like those that followed through and named a kid after you've just put it
on. It's an interesting one, because I think the YouTube channel too, for us, when we really dive into the analytics of it, it helps us understand where the market is and where the interest is within the market. So it helps us in terms of a business to kind of think, well, where do we make our next step? Where is the pull coming from?
Latte art. Everyone wants to watch latte art.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's fine. But I think, as Pete and I always discuss when it comes to this channel, which is that when we do things, it can't be for the sake of getting views. We could be a latte art channel if we wanted to be, and have 1 million subscribers, but sometimes you have to do the things about let's pull a roaster apart or let's pull a coffee machine apart and discuss the internal mechanisms, because you're going to have people that want to actually be educated and not just watch you pour a swan for the 10th time.
Yeah, I think for us too, as like a provider of coffee, I mean, Queensland and not unlike I suppose Western Australia, geographically we're a very big state. There's a lot of ground to cover, and so if you've got customers that are up far north Queensland and they're having some issues dialing in their grinder, and sometimes you got to think back to when you were sort of new to the industry. Sometimes you just get so frustrated and you can't see your way out of the problem, and you just get deeper and deeper into your own headspace. And so the beauty for that is the phone call comes in and goes, oh my god, it's not working, and you go, all right, well, okay, have you tried this? Okay, look, have you got a phone handy? Yes, go to our YouTube channel, click on this episode, 2 minutes and 30, have a look at that and see if that helps really sort of crystallize your thinking. There's a visual sort of walkthrough on how you can recalibrate your grinder, and then you ring back 20 minutes, everything was great, fantastic. And so I think those customers who live in a remote capacity, it allows you to reach into them very quickly and provide that sort of support. And I think that's where the digital space is really fun.
It's filling a gap. I certainly know that we unboxed a certain coffee machine and we were really struggling to install it because we didn't have an instruction manual. So we Googled it and there was very little about it. So then when we ended up filming a video about it, we had like 12,000 views in 2 days because other people were then Googling it to try and find it.
This is the cat.
Thanks for joining us. So I guess then the last question is, in terms of where we've come from and where we are, and talking about third wave, fourth wave, and where we're going. Although it may demonetize the video, a certain COVID-19 and how that's kind of affecting where we will end up. Between the two of you on the front lines and from a roaster's perspective, what's next? Are we headed towards convenience and only convenience out of a fear of long-term connections, or are we?
I'm gonna try to hear first, Cal.
Yeah, it's a shallow question. Just throw in.
Give me 10 seconds. I'll answer every element of that. No, look, in the front lines, in a state of lockdown where we're wearing face masks and sanitizing for every 2 seconds. That we touch something, it's very much leaning towards that takeaway model, and a lot of businesses have commented that moving forward they will be that takeaway convenience element. But I think that's just a band-aid. There's something about that connection, entirely us as human beings, that we need that next step. We need that connection for. I'm sure Peter, you can talk a little bit more about that.
Oh, look, I think what COVID's really kind of shown is that the consumer's very deliberately splitting into two areas, and I think speed's basically the new retail currency. I think that's definitely, we're going to see more demands placed upon us as an industry to do things quicker, because people are just they seem to be more time poor or have less patience. So. And I think so that sort of laneway I think is going to really satisfy, a lot of the equipment that we see that helps us in terms of workflow, whether it's milk steamers and tampers and some of the new super auto stuff's around's pretty cool. And I think the thing is that you've got a range of people that are happy to take the transactional approach. They're not about the banter and they're not about sort of the experience. But they still want to pay for a quality cup of coffee. It's just not, they're not interested in that other stuff that comes with it, And then you're going to get those that are really interested and they want the discussion and they're inquisitive and they want to know more about what they're chasing, that sort of experience. And so I think as business owners, we will have to satisfy both of those. Absolutely. And I think that's going to be important. It's definitely highlighted some of the inefficiencies to the industry in terms of let's call it the restaurant cafe sort of industry, and so there is going to be some normalisation out of that. And sadly, it hasn't really sort of overly improved the lives of our producers and those that are in producing countries. And so I think, we will start to see that really bite a little bit harder this year for them. And so, it was, the timing for the East African harvest was very unfortunate timing for those guys this year, because obviously that's when everyone was kind of thinking about what their buying was going to be like, And in particular, South Africa, they've had a bumper year. That was their fly harvest was amazing. So what I didn't fulfil in terms of my purchasing through my Kenyan producer, I bought as much as I could on his fly crop just recently, and the coffee was incredible. But I think COVID's definitely going to change the way. Definitely a lot more online. I think that's here to stay. I think those sort of delivery type applications and modules they're here and they're never going to go away. And I think definitely retailing more online and home consumption will be something that increases incredibly. And so again, being within your digital space and how you represent yourself digitally is basically now going to be extremely vital, because this is how people will be judging you in terms of is this a brand I want to be involved with? Are these my type of people? And I think, we as a business, Wolff Coffee Roasters, really saw the trust of our community, because how that our community came and rallied and supported us during COVID. And I think everyone was in the same boat when it first started. We were all worried about how deep is this going to go. And unfortunately in Victoria, you saw how deep it can go. And we've been very lucky up here in Queensland that, things have been fairly normal. Still with some restrictions around it, but we're definitely not walking around with masks, and we're free to travel and around wherever we want to go.
It's interesting though, the sense of nationalism, but then also interstate, and how coffee is different in such a big way. Because what I'm hearing from you is that the slower way of making things might die off, and yet we've got Cal who's saying that this has been a killer week for filter. So unless you're running it all as batch brew, I would say that what we're seeing is things like V60s and AeroPress are going to die down in shop, but it's the opposite in a place like Victoria, where you're just selling a lot of batch brew. So state to state, it's a completely different story as well.
There's going to be a lot of adaptability then required moving forward, and each state / city, even further, each community is going to have to adapt at a different level for what the future is going to be bringing for not only specialty coffee, but for the coffee restaurant industry in itself, and as a consumer, how we interact in that setting.
All right, well, I guess we'll just open up if there's any Q&As or Qs or A's. I don't see any on that side. I've got no from Mauricio. Cal, do you have any questions for us?
Look, I had a gentleman come in today, and one of his things, he's definitely a coffee enthusiast. He doesn't work in the industry, but absolute sucker for it. Loves everything that's about, loves exploring more coffee and seeing what's coming out and the connection through. And one of the questions he had today was regarding what is the next piece of gear he should get at home. So, he's got a V60 AeroPress, percolator, and it's two of them getting a locker pot. And with that, I think he was saying, where can I go to learn more? And I think you've inadvertently answered that question, which is the Wolff College Coffee on YouTube. So we do get a lot of customers wanting to know more, and would this be kind of like a very easy guide, just to copy, paste like the link essentially, and just jump on YouTube, look it up, and have a little search bar and be able to find it through there? And / is there any external modules or internal modules that you guys offer that he could jump on?
Yes. I think from our perspective, one of the things that we've certainly seen as well during the last 9 months has been this huge uptake of people saying, I want to make more coffee at home because I have to. What's the best way to do that? And I think one of the ways we actually answered that was we brought out a new course that was Bring Your Own Machine course. So if you lived locally and you wanted to pull your home machine off your kitchen bench and lug it in here, I could teach you in a course how to do it better. And one of the things that then we learnt as a subsequent thing from that was I've always been of the mindset that things like sunbeams and Breville's have always been that little bit plasticky, and it's like it's that thing you buy at Myers, it's not a linear mini, or it's not a Slayer one group. But I have been blown away, having done I think 3 Breville's now, people bringing them in, that the quality of home espresso machines have just been getting better and better and better. And so for you $800-900 now, it's not as cheap as it used to be. My answer is always, if you're going to do home espresso, invest in the grinder and not the machine, because it's the grinder that'll steer you wrong. But otherwise, yeah, YouTube channel, definitely YouTube channel, because we've got a video in there that's, we can have you dialed in 4 minutes. We did it as a build your own adventure style of book. So it's, if you're running too fast, click here. If you're running too slow, click here. And in 4 minutes, we can have you dialed in. But I don't know, Pete, what do you make at home? You make instant in the mornings, don't you?
Yeah, well, see, we're not. It's a bit different because we're very big tea drinkers when we go home. But at the same time, when we live very close to our businesses, so so we can be at work within 5 minutes, and so by the time if I wanted to have a home espresso machine, I turned the machine on. Time it warmed up, I dialed myself in. I've driven down to Wolff, got myself 2 coffees, and driven back home. You know what I mean? So, so I think from
He does that.
and we do that. But the one thing that which obviously we have played around with is the instant coffee. So our freeze-dried instant coffee is something that we use a lot at home. We just happen to have a jar.
Nice. And also on that plug, Colab Espresso currently does have a Kenyan of the instant. We did a bit of side-by-sides.
Yeah.
My God.
That
Game changer.
That one.
It was an interesting one because we learn a lot. Because what a lot of people realise, not realise, is that we also have another business that makes coffee popsicles or espresso popsicles, and so we, being here in Queensland, things get this Queen of Pops one. It gets very hot, and so we were kind of thinking around, how can we get something that's a little bit, sort of frozen on the sticks of the popsicle thing, and so. And they have a double ristretto on every popsicle, so they're actually hand pulled espresso shots. But the interesting part was that when we learned to freeze liquid coffee at minus 26 degrees Celsius, it changes a lot, and particularly the way you roast the coffee in certain varietals. I mean, there was one coffee I was particularly most excited about trying, and I remember biting into the popsicle, and it literally changed my mood for the worst, and it was so bitter, and I don't know what it was, but I just got really...
That coffee will go on names.
I got in a bad mood, it's like, my God. And so as we started to deep dive into it, we just realised that it was a certain type of varietal of coffee, and then also the way that we roast it obviously has a lot to do with what we can do in terms of the freezing of the coffee. And so that sort of helped us in terms of the liquefaction process of when we started to move to freeze-dried espresso. And that's all it is. We're just freeze-drying liquid espresso. There's no more secrets.
And that explains it as well, because I never understood why, I think the very first one we did was it was a Brazilian coffee.
Yes.
And it tasted almost identical to when we had it as espresso.
Yeah.
Then we did I think it was the voice, and it was that second one that it was like, we're like, oh, it'll taste exactly like the espresso, and it was just so different. It was good, but it was just different, and it just went off on its own skew, its own tangent. You're like, but how? It was very strange.
Yeah, so I think the instant coffee value, is a great value towards that convenience and that sort of speed thing. But I suppose it's not. Yeah. I'm not the best sort of example for that because if we want to drink coffee, then we go out. We just come down here and get it. You know what I mean? So, whereas for people from home, I appreciate they enjoy the ritual and they like
hobby.
Yeah, they like the craft of doing it, and here it is. And so I was there too. Don't get me wrong. I was a bloody had an espresso machine on a timer in the morning, so when I wake up, it was all hot and ready to go, and it was crazy. But not anymore.
All right. Well, thank you for having us. Really appreciate it. We do hope that you've absolutely enjoyed Big Dog and Little Red and Edelweiss and Boyce and Aida and Finca Vista Hermosa, and I think there was another Costa Rica in there. You had Alejo.
Oh yeah.
So
Yes.
the last week is coming, which means you've got Oktoberfest, which is our nod to the German beer festival. And this one's a golden ale.
Yes.
We base it on a different kind of coffee every year, so this one's a golden ale. You've got Hummingbird, which is our signature filter coffee. That's a combination Kenya, Ethiopia.
Yep.
And then, oh goodness, I think the last one was, that is Alejos. You've got the Costa Rican, which is an Obata, which we've never done from Alejo before. Yeah, so you got some really cool stuff on the way, and we hope everyone enjoys it.
I'm sure they will. I'll just put them up on the shelf so tomorrow morning you come in, it is there, ready. It is ready.
So thank you for having us. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you everyone for watching. This is going to be uploaded later on. This will be one of our weekly vlogs. So yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it down here in Melbourne.
Thank you.
Tell your cat we said hi.
I absolutely will. Thanks.
Thank you.
See you guys.
See you again.
Right. Done. Thank you, everyone.
Mate, appreciate it.
That was really good.
Yeah, we had
The whole